Tuolla Lontoossa Jennin mä kohtasin. Halo Vepio, Vepio, ho! Hän on neidosten joukossa kaunihin. Halo Vepio, Vepio, ho!
All right, welcome again to another episode of Gloucester Bookies. With me today, Laura Ventimiglia, and on my left is George Rosen. I am Wayne Soini. We've been together before for a while, but it has been, I think, never that we've spent an entire program discussing writing. So although there'll be reference to books, and we'll show you some books and refer to books that we've written, because we're all writers of books, published books, we have a desire to convey to you ideas on writing besides the one which I famously remember I listened to a panel of writers one time, including a Pulitzer Prize winner who looked out at us and said, "Why aren't you home writing?" And that was pretty good advice.
Yes, wow.
You know. But anyway, so write is a big one. Write! Exclamation mark! Write. And if you are inclined to write, there's also then tips and ideas and methods that still that we have either borrowed from others or come up with on our own when we've been writing. I'd like to turn to Laura first because you have the most books in front of you.
And books that I've brought before, so it's possible you may have seen an earlier show when we talked a little bit about writing, not a lot. But these are my two favorite books, Gentle Writing Advice and Bird by Bird. So Bird by Bird is Anne Lamott. Gentle Writing Advice is Chuck Wending. And they both make it seem fun, easy, no pressure, although they admit it's not always like that. But I've picked up like little tips from both of them. And you're familiar, have you read this one too, Wayne?
I've read both. Yeah.
You've read both. What about you,
I've
George?
read neither.
You haven't?
No.
And
my goodness.
you still write? You actually write
Yes,
without the
yes,
aid of these
yes.
books?
Without the
Okay.
book.
I'm older than these people, right?
That's probably true. But anyway, so they just have some really fun advice. And the one I liked the most, I think, about Chuck was that he just kind of said, don't take it too seriously. Like, give yourself permission not to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and write for 2 hours, write whatever, just to say that you've written. Really look for your own pace, look for your own style. And George, I'm always curious what other people's rhythms are in terms of writing. So how do you do that? Because you've got several articles and books out, right?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, and I was doing both fiction and nonfiction.
Okay.
And nonfiction was kind of easy in the sense that, I'd have gotten an assignment or I was reporting on something and feeding it, or like I did political speech writing and, someone says, you've got 20 minutes to write a speech for so-and-so because politicians can't talk. Though they do. But for fiction writing, I've never been able to do the discipline thing where they say, someone says, yep, as you were describing it, I get up at 6 every morning and write until 10. But I did write, actually, my first published work, which is my only published novel. I wrote that at a time when all sorts of other things were happening, and including having a newborn kid running around the house and stuff. And I determined not to do a period of time, but to every day write. This was back when there were typewriters and stuff. Essentially 500 words, but two typed pages.
Right.
Every day. And that, was hard, but I made myself do it. And it was both important to start it, for me at least. For some people, that's a burden. I found the most interesting and important part was to not write more than that, to stop, and sometimes it was in the middle of a sentence.
Oh.
And that was very, very useful, because I have found, at least, that if you kind of write until you're exhausted with an idea or something, and stop when you can't think of anything more to say, that makes it very, very hard to pick up again the next morning. Where if you're
It's like picking up a blank page.
Yeah.
Again.
Where if you're in the middle of something,
Right.
middle of doesn't.
Then you have
Then
momentum.
you finish the sentence, you finish the paragraph, and you know where you are. And I've always found that extremely useful as a kind of goad to keeping at it. And I started that book, which ended up being kind of a mystery thriller book, but I had really no idea at the beginning what I was going to do. It was not plotted out very strictly speaking in advance, but I found that to be an important kind of way to
So, and you
start.
could keep that thought in your head for like a whole day?
Oh, well, but also, I just written 2 pages, or,
Right, right.
a week into it, I just written, it was adding up. I'd written a couple of chapters or something. So that would lead me, I could say, oh, yeah. I mean, I as a writer, it's really important to me to think sentence by sentence. I mean, you talk about in your sheet there, about writing. Let's all write a good sentence.
Right. So this is where I'm going to jump in
describe
for Wayne.
that. Yeah.
So Wayne just recently gave a talk at the Sawyer Free Library on how to write. Right? What is? I don't even have my glasses on. Hold on. I'm sorry.
Write your book this
There you
winter.
go. Write your book this winter. My notes are all over it. But it was a phenomenal presentation or discussion topic, and so concise. Like, I felt like it was all the major points in one concise place. And you're right, George. One of the books that he recommended was Building Great Sentences.
Building Great Sentences. Brooks Landon, University of Iowa, which we know, University of Iowa is the premier flagship place to go for a college that teaches writing. If you ever have a chance to go to University of Iowa and learn about writing.
They, in fact, the Iowa Writers Workshop, which I was admitted to but didn't go to, because
You got married.
Yeah, so you don't have to know
my then wife to be sort of was saying that she'd be willing to go to the university, the famous Iowa Writers Workshop, but she didn't really want to go there.
Yeah.
So
It was like Green Acres, right? It's the place to be.
Well, but
you're in Hawkeye country.
But actually, it's primarily a postgraduate thing. In other words, if you've
already know how to
you have
spell
to apply
and
to the.
But that is the fella, Brooks
Okay.
Brooks Landon. The reason I bring it up is that a lot of us have different ways of learning. Some of us are great at reading a book. Others really want to listen and hear it. And then there's those people, of course, who are visual and would like a video. This is available. It's one of the few books that I've ever recommended that has a CD, so you can listen to it in your car, or a video series in which the chapters are covered. So the book itself is a slimmed down outline of what he tells people in the actual video, which is effectively a class. In other words, you get 12 hours with Brooks Landon as your professor, speaking to you as an instructor at the University of Iowa in a class that he's taught for 30 years there with great success. That's why he was selected to do it, and that's why the series exists, Building Great Sentences. Brooks Landon, wonderful. I was entertained by what I listened to. I read the book, and I also listened to the videos. Sawyer Library has the CDs,
They
the
do?
videos. Yes. I
Oh.
don't think they have 15 sets, but they
No.
have 1 or 2 sets to borrow for nothing. You can listen to it on the CD. You can watch the videos. They're very entertaining. The guy's wonderful.
Yeah.
And just as not a stand-up comic, but he's really entertaining as an instructor. And remember, his subject matter is building sentences.
Now tell it, but what kind of sentences? Not
All
short.
right,
Here
right,
I
right,
am.
Right. He didn't need the book. You don't need the book. Nobody out there needs the book for short sentences. What do you need for short sentences? You know, the sentence, Jesus wept. That's it. It's a short sentence. It's done. That's what you don't need a book to keep telling you, this is what a short sentence is. You know what a short sentence is, and you can make short sentences easily. What you need, and be helped by, is making better long sentences longer. Make the longer sentences tell more, convey more in information, and can do more things. And that's why he has 12 chapters about how many different ways it can be used as a long sentence, and longer, longish, real long sentences. And the best part is examples. He's full of examples from great writers that you can learn from. He says, and I guarantee myself that it's true, he says of his course that there is nothing you can learn in a shorter time than what he speaks that will improve your writing more than his course.
Oh, wow.
There's nothing you can learn in a shorter time that can improve your, because the sentence.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm wondering if that's like a marketing technique that,
Well,
that Anne Lamott might say too.
Well, she could say it too.
No,
but
only
the reason it works is that the unit of where the body's buried
right,
is the sentence.
right.
And if you can master the writing of the sentence and make a sentence have a surprise and build in some suspense in a sentence and make a dramatic point at the last word of a sentence, it is powerful writing. And he shows that by demonstrating it. And then you get on to it. His students have gone, through the course and compared their writing before and their writing after, and come back and told him such things that really it improved a lot, markedly. They noticed it really made the difference in their options and what they thought about.
And you talked about how don't laugh.
You know,
Don't laugh out there if you're looking at this. But in the olden days, like you, before there were computers, in fact, I have a funny story about our friend Terry. But did I do this? So one of the things that he talks about, Landon talks about, is rearranging your sentences. You talk about this a lot, rearranging your sentences to see how they read better.
Yeah,
So you know
like
the
that.
old,
Look
you
at
know so don't laugh. You know on your computers now it says cut and paste. Well, cut and paste or copy and paste didn't just come from computers. Did you ever actually cut your stuff out?
Enough. Well, actually, I worked at a consulting company
Okay.
in the early 1970s, and I was being, an analyst of information and doing some other things, but everybody had to prepare. It was a giant government project, and everyone had to prepare these reports for the government, and there were 40 people involved and with different chunks of it and stuff like that. And the way it was put together in 1972 was on a floor about as big as this room. People were laying pages and pages of text, and they had scissors, and they had tape. Basically they would, I don't know when Xeroxing started to be quite easily around. That was sort of like mid-60s or something like that. But what you would do, people, there'd be the first drafts of things. Then you'd take out a blank piece of paper, and there was clerical staff, and there were all sorts of people,
Actually, Scotch
taping all this stuff, and then like that, and then putting it into a Xerox machine. And
Xerox, for those that don't know.
Oh, right. Yes, I
Copy
do.
machine. Photocopy. Photocopy
I
today.
found in my office, maybe year 2000 or 1990s, talking with people about, I have to Xerox this. And they're looking blank. They don't know what I mean. I have to Xerox this. Oh, you mean photocopy? Yeah, I know. The language has moved on. But anyway, you've got an example
so
here.
this is a smaller example than your floor, but there was one sentence in the piece I'm working on now, one sentence I just didn't feel right. And so I finally, and I can't do, I'm sort of a visual person. I have to listen and I have to see it. I have to do both if I'm learning something.
Yeah.
So I finally just cut it up. I had the sentence that I liked, the first sentence that I liked, the last sentence that I liked, and then in between the stuff wasn't flowing.
You should do this all with those magnetic things on the refrigerator.
Oh, forget it. You could. That might be a good way for me to learn my Italian. But I cut them up like by individual words or a phrase that went together. Yes. And then thing that's easy for me then is, like you on the floor, George, then you can just move them around. And I might have 2 or 3 copies of the same sentence, so that at the same time I can move it. Instead of copying and pasting, because when you copy and paste it on the computer, then that's it. Then you have to copy and paste it again, and unless you you can lose it.
You're prioritizing things too. When I would write on a typewriter or by longhand, I would scribble an alternative word above a word.
Yes.
You know, I wasn't sure what I wanted to say.
Right.
Did they leap or jump, or which is it? And they were both, they were both in suspense, and they were kind of equally valid.
Yeah.
Whereas certainly it's easier now on a computer, but it's still not the same.
Right.
You kind of have to choose one, and you can't kind of have 3 possible verbs in your head, and you'll land on it. And so it made a big kind of difference, because you don't want to. You don't want to have a final version. I mean, this is something of writing. You don't want to have a final version too early. I mean,
no.
Oh, you don't?
You can't write. You don't want to rush it.
No.
I have asked women, how long would your pregnancy last if you had your own choice?
Yeah.
And really, very few of them say, a week. Most people say they're content with the 9 months because it feels right, and it's not, the right pace. Don't push it. What did you end up with?
All right, so here's the
result.
Here's the 3 sentences the way it started. Now,
the way they started.
The way it started. Now, I'm not saying that the way it ended up was great, or the way it started was great.
We'll judge.
Okay.
That. You can't judge.
All right, you judge.
And we'll be very stern.
I'm sure.
Right.
I waved. I knew Matteo could not see me, or could he? Was he looking longingly at our house, regretting his absence from our family on this day, Sunday, our sacred time together each week? He would be home were it not for the poverty of our village and the abundance of fish then in our waters.
And that's the way it started.
Sunday, that's the way I started.
Okay.
But here's how it ended up. And other people, when they read it, misread it too. So I waved. I knew Matteo could not see me, or could he? On this day, Sunday, our sacred time together each week, was he looking longingly at our house, regretting his absence from our family?
I think that's much better.
I think that's
well, it doesn't mean it's great, but
I'm
it's a better place
going to point something out. I just want to, as I was listening to it, it says, it says on this, the second sentence.
Yeah.
On this day, Sunday, our sacred time together each week, was he looking longingly at our house, regretting his absence from our family? That explains the looking. Was he looking? The other one took cart before the horse.
Yeah.
This one puts it in the proper order, I think.
And people were saying, well, Sunday, because Sunday is at the beginning of the section, and people were thinking it was the same Sunday.
Right.
No, it was a different Sunday.
Different.
This was every Sunday, the sacred time, and the first Sunday was a special...
A particular day, right.
Once a year kind of thing. Anyway, so people laugh, so let me just tell you this funny story. So everybody... I'm sure by now, has heard of the Gloucester 400 Stories Project. Yeah. And the fabulous book that we produced as a commemoration of the Gloucester's 400th anniversary, 400th plus anniversary. So
the title of which is?
Gloucester 400. Oh, people are. Wait a minute. Our people are story.
Our people,
Our people,
our stories.
our stories.
Right.
So it's a great book of stories of people that were submitted about or for or by people.
These are regular people in Gloucester of all different various backgrounds, and they all contributed stories.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I was working on the stories project with Terry, who was the executive director of the project, or director of the project, and she asked me to edit. I helped her editing some of the stories, so she asked me to edit one story. I was so confused, and I would move like paragraphs, and then I couldn't even move paragraphs, so I ended up cutting the whole story
The same way.
the same
Same way? Oh,
it
my
was
God.
like 10 or 12 pages typed,
Oh.
and I cut it the same way like this, and I moved it. I had we have a huge dining table that sits like 16 or 18 people. I've got the pieces moving, and then when I finally settled on it, I taped it all together, and then I took all the pieces, and because I had done several copies of it, so I'd have enough pieces to move in. So then it had to have been a pile of pieces this big. So I took a picture and I sent it to Terry, and I said, "Phew, I'm finished." Meaning, I finally finished editing the paper, and she came back and said, "Oh no, did you hate it that much that you cut it to pieces and threw it away?" She had never ever heard of cut and paste in our old-fashioned way.
Yeah.
She was
Like
only
that.
used to cut and paste on
Well,
them,
there
but I
was-
thought that was funny.
William Burroughs, who the phrase drug-addled famous beatnik writer, wrote Naked Lunch in the late 50s and early 60s, and who apparently there's a movie being made with, I think Johnny Depp plays him.
Probably.
I mean, just in the past month or so,
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
is coming out about his time in Mexico City when.
Under the volcano.
Well, now that's different. That's Malcolm Lowry. It's a Mexican
different
thing. Different guy, yeah. William Burroughs is an American, went down there and he started having a gay affair with some local people, but he also killed his wife
Hey.
in a drunken game of William Tell.
Huh.
Oh, man.
Was attempting, I
Yeah,
don't know,
do
to
not
shoot an apple
do
on
that.
her head or some just.
Yeah.
But this is all in the Kerouac Ginsburg
Yeah.
world and stuff. And he was kind of, an enfant terrible stuff. And in 1962, I was like 16, I attended the Edinburgh Festival's International Writers Workshop, not because of me, I'm at 16, but my mother was writing a report for The Nation magazine, and she was a writer. And Burroughs got up and explained his, I think, split page was the phrase, technique, which was you write a book, you write a story in the normal way, right, and his idea of stories were just insane. I mean, they were just kind of wild combinations of drug visions and science fiction, and then you throw them on the floor, all the pages.
Okay.
Then you take any 2 pages you want, you fold them lengthwise down the middle,
Down the middle.
like this, and then you tape.
Like this. with
Yes,
the-
right.
with the
You
words
put 2
showing.
pages
Okay.
together, and he ended up publishing things
You're
like
kidding.
this. But it was this kind of. This was in the time when John Cage was doing all the musical things in strange ways and combination. It was kind of. See what serendipity comes up with. I mean, part of
Right.
it's your intentional writing, and parts of it's just what the gods just seem to be
Taped
together.
together.
You realize we're talking to people who want to learn how to.
And right, yeah, so don't. All right, we should send it back to Wayne.
We'll get back.
All right,
I will deal with a more rational kind of thing about the book talking about sentences.
Yeah.
I was in sophomore English in high school, and it was the supposedly advanced class, so we all thought we were really very
Cutting edge.
cutting
authors.
edge 14-year-olds or 15-year-olds. writing English, and he assigned a topic. I have no idea what the topic was, and everyone wrote some wonderful little thing, and he flunked everybody in the class. And he said, "Okay, we're going to start with sentences," and then for like the next 3 weeks, we wrote sentences, and after that we wrote paragraphs and stuff like that. But it really got the sense of these are units, and and if you don't write a sentence, I mean, this is all high school themes or something, but for fiction too, if you don't write a sentence which doesn't lead in your mind or in the reader's mind to another sentence, you're sunk. I mean, you want a process, and you want these units to kind of to pique curiosity and
You do.
and
You do. And sometimes the way to pique curiosity is to start again and then present the beginning, how it got there. And sometimes it is chronological, starting with something and going eventually to the climax event. I want the people out there to understand the creativity that is possible, which you've been describing, of moving things around. One of the great nonfiction writers of our time, still living, teaches creative nonfiction writing at Princeton University. Is named John McPhee.
Right.
You can read, and they're all in the library, you can read any book by John McPhee, and you will be impressed. I don't care what subject it is. Don't even worry about the subject, because as soon as you open the book, you will be drawn into it. He's written books about oranges and geology and all things you say, I don't think I'm interested in a book in geology or in oranges. On the contrary, as they say in French, au contraire.
oh
You know,
oh
it really works. It really works because a good writer.
and
good
he,
writing
I
is
don't
good
know
writing.
if you've I mean, I know this from people who've known him, and he's describing the methods.
Method.
Years
gonna
ago,
get
he
into-
was putting things together. He would create note cards.
That's it.
And he'd end up with hundreds and hundreds of note cards with little fragments of information.
Is that what you? So that you're talking about John McPhee? who
yeah,
would do
yeah,
the note
right.
cards.
John
And
John
then
McPhee
he'd
puts on the
shuffle them around.
He's
Yeah.
doing interview with John Brown on this, and picture of Mount Fujiyama in the distance, etc. All of these cards, hundreds of cards, it's true, and he then puts them, I think with a thumbtack, on a huge bulletin board in any order at first, because he's going to get there, and perhaps he's even shuffling them, one by one, because he wants to get the order down before he,
Oh,
I
starts
guess,
to
sets,
write.
I'm going to say sets pen to paper, but it might have been, I don't know how he wrote, typewriter, paper, or by now computer, but his way of getting a structure together that made sense to him, that satisfied him, was the essential first, second step, because he did all this research first. But after he got these index cards ready, they weren't in any order until he decided on the order. And I think that is so appropriate for people to understand that even though you're writing, what you're satisfied is the first paragraph and the second paragraph and so on, that it can be shifted, and often should be, to make a more effective story or novel or nonfiction,
Right,
even
right.
nonfiction. The striking thing about this is that it's nonfiction, but it's so creative, and it can spill over into whatever you're writing. By the way, I didn't tell you this part.
Okay.
I'm a hack writer in the labeling of Kurt Vonnegut.
Okay.
I was in a class 1 hour class, 2 hours I think, with Kurt Vonnegut one time in Boston, and 30 people, one teacher, Kurt Vonnegut, and he said, how many of you think you could write a story about a rodeo if I gave you 2 days? And I raised my hand. 2 or 3 others raised their hand, probably 5 others. And he very slowly raised his hand. that he also could write a story about a rodeo if given a couple days. He said, we're all hack writers, the ones that raise their hand. Because if you're really an intense and literate writer, you can't do that you can't be told, write a story about a rodeo and produce one, or especially in 2 days. You're moved by the muse, something that speaks to you, addresses you. You start writing about it. So I think the best part of being a hack writer is productivity. You can put those books up. He wrote many books in that fashion. I'm sure sometime although he was stumped. He's a World War II veteran. Being able to write his own story about what World War II was like threw him for a loop for 25 years until he finally said, oh no, what it is actually surreal science fiction, comedy, all of these things mashed up together. And it's one of these things, not only is it out of order, it plays with the concept of time, of how somebody can be zipped into the past and zip into the future. It's like a science fiction thing that he makes, that he was able to, only by this very strange device, he was able to satisfy himself that he was writing a story that matched his experience, his wild and crazy experiences in World War II. Something that he couldn't do when he was just writing it straight out.
Right.
But anyway.
And that's Slaughterhouse-Five.
Slaughterhouse-Five, I'm sorry, yes, because people might want to say, I wonder what book that is. I wish I would like to know what it was that he was talking about. Slaughterhouse-Five, available in libraries for free.
Okay, so Wayne, I'm going to ask, Okay, so I'm going to ask Wayne to go back to the beginning part of your talk at the library when you did this
that's a
talk.
wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm
Do
so
you
pleased.
like that? Start there and then.
I thought it was so.
I found that really helpful too.
I thought it was adorable, really, to use that word.
It is adorable.
If you don't say so yourself.
Well, it's not his work.
Well, no, okay.
Unless you're talking about your work.
No, I'm not. There's an author named Laurie Gwen Shapiro, who's a super person, and she lives in New York City. She's got a lot of credits at documentary films. She's also written a best-selling author. She's best-selling New York Times author of a book called The Stowaway that is in the library for free to read that if you want. It's a nonfiction book. It's wonderful, creative, well-illustrated, surprising. It's a page-turner. And she's written another book that's coming out next year on Amelia Earhart, which is going to be, I am sure, from the research she's done, and I'm privy to what she's done, is so intensely and passionately researched that it's going to be the definitive biography of Amelia Earhart with the myths and the mistakes of other.
I'm just grinning because in the past week and a half, there has been a story about this expedition which had found an object on the sea floor near the island where, she supposedly
went
heard,
down.
and they went over there, and these people were really confident that they finally gotten plane, and they went down there, several thousand feet, I don't know how many feet under the water, and it turned out to be a rock. It was an airplane-shaped rock. It was sort of like opening up Al Capone's safe years ago with great production. They were going to see what was there, and they opened it up, and
absolutely
and so it's still up in the air is probably not the right phrase to use, but it's still up in the air as to exactly what happened.
But she's got the definitive with a capital D.
Wherever you can have answers.
Right.
And she also can tear apart, in the same way that you just did, the things that are phony, fictitious, that have clung to her. And by the way, one of the things is she found, maybe not to her surprise, it's common, the person who writes their own life up in an autobiography mixes up things or maybe exaggerates or stuff. And she has, without any question, picked out those and put them under the microscope and shown. So, I mean, really, it's a wonderful book to come.
But
main
her
thing-
writing career started very early in her life.
We're just going to say,
Yeah.
sharing with you, and she's given me permission to share with other writing people who aspire to be writers. In the second grade,
Yeah.
her first
She said.
published work was a very, very short story that was called The Ghost and the Witch. And when you just say that immediately, you say that title, that title, I want to read that. The Ghost and the Witch. Once upon a time, there lived a ghost who had no friends. But one day he was walking through the forest and he met a witch. And she said, "You're a good-looking ghost." The ghost said, "Hey, let's be buddies." And so, on Halloween, they always went trick-or-treating together. What an ending. Now, when I saw that, I spotted in that, I thought, rightly, that this is a really concise example of good writing. In this way, not only the title is exciting and interesting, it draws you in, it also immediately starts with a protagonist. You need somebody to root for, to care about. And that protagonist also should be in some kind of trouble that you can relate to. And so she has a ghost who had no friends. That's a ghost in trouble. And the journey that we're always looking for in a book immediately proceeds. He's doing it he was walking through the forest, right? Of course, that's expanded in the books that we read, and they're coasting around the Cape of Good Horn in a storm. But he's walking in a forest, legitimately, and he met a witch. Now, here is an ally, but often allies are disguised in a scary, even repulsive way that it wouldn't be you're not expecting that person to be your friend or ally. But indeed, this witch turns out to say to him, "You're a good-looking ghost." So there's dialogue. You always need in your short stories and novels, and all of us use it, dialogue.
Yeah, you meet a tin man, and you meet a
That-
cowardly lion, and
I say those things are in
and you
there.
go on the journey together because they all need something.
You can just take this story by Laurie and multiply it out. It's in there at the core of things like The Wizard of Oz. Absolutely. And then the protagonist that we're rooting for and hopeful for does the right thing, makes a decision, a brave, risk-taking decision, but it does it, makes the leap. Let's be buddies, does it. And that decision resolves the issue, because on Halloween, they always went trick-or-treating together. And that's the Shakespearean ending. It's sort of a Jack and Jill, or Romeo and Juliet, or whoever's getting married in the play goes off into that kingdom together. So I think that's, even in the second grade,
Right.
people can, with any genius, can recognize, can see it, probably not verbalize it, but in their story they followed it. And I'd encourage people who are writing to bear in mind, you want to start with somebody that you're going to follow through in the story, who's in trouble, some kind of trouble. And that class I took with Kurt Vonnegut said, we're all too, he said, I can tell what's wrong with your stories. We're all too nice. You're all too nice. You're so considerate. You seek harmony. You don't want to disturb other people. So you're not cruel enough to your protagonists. And and he says what you want is to put them in bad trouble, to see what they are made of. And I thought that was pretty good advice to help us as a group of, in that instance, middle class and harmonious people. But this story allows us to explain what you would go for when you're confronting that blank page, that clear white or computer screen, and you're going to do the first letters.
Which used to be green.
Used to be green.
They used to be
But
green,
change,
you're right. Right.
perhaps change the kind of stories that you tell, because people were looking at white paper, and then they
But
were
what
looking
is
at
that
green
story?
screen.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No.
But what is that story? I don't want to say lead into, but you use that story as a lead into the different elements of a story.
Right.
So those,
We
I
just-
think, are really helpful too.
Well, that's what we
Protagonist,
we
alley.
just
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
we just
We
we
did the
just
She
changed.
was
the alley.
recapitulating
Alley.
that.
We did.
Yeah.
By the way, if anybody writes the station, care of Studio 1623, I can send out the outline to you either by email or bring the mail. Fact is, there are some books I want to recommend before I
Okay.
sign off myself, because you two have things to say and
Oh,
you
no,
have
no.
a book to go into.
Well, no,
I
but
want- we
it's
want to
just
listen
this.
to George's
Naturally,
book.
we just covered Brooks Landon,
Yeah.
Building Great Sentences. Jessica Brody, for those that are writing novels, Jessica Brody, Save the Cat, writes a novel. Wonderful and easy to follow. And I think it's a reference, so that anytime you run into trouble in writing your novel, you go back and flip through the pages till you find, essentially, some comfort in what she's gone through it, she knows what you're talking about, and she talks about it, and she says some solutions, more than one option, one of which is quit, put it aside. George
vacation.
Saunders, who is an author in his own right, teaches a class in Russian literature. And this is the book that he came up with, that he felt studying Russian literature would result in you being a better writer. And the people in the college which he teaches, hundreds of people sign up for this class every year. And he auditions or something, narrows it down to about 30 people. So really, you wouldn't be able to get into the class. I wouldn't be able to. But you can get this book, because this book is essentially a transcription of the kind of thing that he teaches in his class, in analyzing Russian short stories. It's called A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. Don't be thrown off by the goofy title. It's not about a swim in the pond in the rain. That's the title of one of the stories, especially that moved him and would move you whether you read it straight or you read it with the analysis. Last two, John Franklin is a nonfiction writer, won the Pulitzer Prize twice, and he tried to let people understand what it would be to write. His book is called Writing for Story. What it is two stories he wrote with footnotes that you can look back and forth for the story that describes the decisions, the options, the things that made him write the sentence in that manner. So you can go back and say, you can go back to the moment of creation. You can read a story. It sings as a story. It's one of those. It is Pulitzer Prize winning material, and it's entertaining and interesting as a story. But then you say, I wonder what made him write or select those facts, that sentence in that place. And he goes, and you can go and see the footnotes will tell you. But anyway, Robert, so it's like looking over his shoulder at your own pace and your own time to say how he makes these decisions as a writer. And you can practice yourself. Lastly, Robert Olin Butler, who also won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction, From Where You Dream, which likewise is his class bound in a book, because he teaches creative writing. And he got a student to take extensive notes that became the core of the book that he told these students about writing. And what he told these students, for sure, you could take to the bank and use on your own, in your own writing. So those are the things I wanted to say, and go from there. I'm going to turn to George and then back to you.
Yeah, go back to
George
and
and then
George,
back to
because
you.
we want to see what George's book is.
Please.
Well, no, the book is just my book of stories, but what I wanted to talk about was going back to sentences. As you know,
I sentenced you to talk about sentences.
Kernels of story. The book I was going to bring, except I'm not sure I still have a copy of it, was F. Scott Fitzgerald's Notebooks. and which were collected after his death by Matthew Broccoli. You can get them. But he would write down sentences, just a sentence without a conception automatically of a story. I mean, I think one of the most famous ones, I think it's from that as opposed to his actual writing, though he may have used it. The story was, it's always 4 a.m. in the morning, or maybe 2 a.m. It's always 4 a.m. in the morning in the dark night of the soul.
Yes.
And he just wrote that at the beginning as a sentence because in his mind it struck him and it was evocative to lead on to something. And most of the stories I have written have started with an opening sentence, or I will write down something that just occurs to me. Not that I mean, it's not at all knowing what the story is, it's just knowing of the sentences. That
this is popularly known, it's not just F. Scott Fitzgerald and George Rosen, popularly known as writers' notebooks, where you just pick a notebook that has nothing in it before you write, and then you go page to page, and again, it doesn't have to have
you can
any
actually
sequence.
now, because of Scott Fitzgerald, you can buy, I just learned this before coming here, you can buy blank books which are referred to as Scott Fitzgerald writer notebooks. Because he often had categories too. The categories weren't always ones that he created. Some of them were created by the editor, linking together various kinds of kernels. But I used to write, much less so now. You know, I'd end a day of doing something completely different with little scraps of paper on which I had a sentence or something. And again, with the idea of prompting me to lead on to something.
Right.
But also the idea is, I think it works because if it's prompting you to somehow have a thought of what's coming after, that it's going to work for a reader. I mean, my vision, and I would tell this when I taught writing at Tufts for a number of years, and the thing particularly with fiction, but even with nonfiction, you know, you can always, if you're a reader, you can always not read. I mean, in other words, no one's forcing you when you open the book to go on and finish.
Works in two ways. Not only you don't have to read that book. There's plenty of others out and plenty of magazines and everything. It's also you don't have to read. And you can go to the Netflix or TV or down the street for entertainment, whatever, anything other than reading. So there's too much competition these days to make it back in 1900.
Well, even before, I mean, a lifetime friend of mine who became a screenwriter, and he wrote a whole bunch of movies. But I was astounded when we were 18, and I met him, that he would walk out of movie theaters, even if he'd paid, at then it was $1.50 to see. But yeah, I mean, why go on?
Yeah.
it
And that's
wasn't going to get any better.
Yeah, I mean, and I was saying, well, you're obligated, but you're not obligated. You're not obligated to finish something. And I mean, sure, most people, if they start something, will go through it. But life is really short, and pay attention. But if you kind of think of writing in a way or coming up with an opening sentence that will make someone want to read even before you know the story. So rather than having everything all neatly plotted out, and again, different people write in different ways and read in different ways. I kind of like to move from sentence to sentence, to paragraph to moving on in a new direction and finding out what happens next. The literary critic, Canadian guy named Northrop Frye, was writing about all of literature, and he knocks all of literature down into a couple of basic stories, one of which sounds like what you were describing there, but he's dealing with these ancient romances in Greek and Latin, which eventually become pirate adventures and stuff, where, people go out and then the pirates come and then they get kidnapped by pirates, and they go into the underworld. Sometimes the stories go into the real underworld, and all sorts of things happen, and then it ends up with a wedding because people emerge out of the troubles.
Always a wedding.
And
yes.
Find each other, and it turns out that the little girl who was kidnapped is really a princess, and stuff. But he calls those and then stories.
So when you say you write sentence to sentence,
Yeah.
do you literally write a sentence and then stop and think of the next sentence, or
Yeah,
does it just
but I
flow?
usually, with these little kernels I was
Yeah,
talking about,
go
they're
ahead.
written down. I'll read
Yeah.
you some of the sentences I've started stories with.
Yeah.
Very often, I will write a sentence or two sentences or something, or have an image, and I'm always, in a certain sense, not very often, I'll say, something's going to happen that somehow interests me, but I don't know what it is, and then
Okay.
I'll come back
So
a
it's
week
not
later
like,
or
so
something
you don't
else.
start necessarily with like a
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm
general
going to tell the
global
story.
idea.
Well,
Okay.
I mean the story,
Oh,
which
no,
is,
tell-
no, a story which is not in this,
Oh.
which was written and published a while ago. This opening sentence is, "My orthodontist committed suicide when I was 10 years old." And now that had something to do in my head with a friend of, first of all, I never had an orthodontist.
I'm sitting here thinking, oh
My
my God.
confession is not.
What a horrendous thing
It wasn't,
for
you
a
know,
10-year-old to
well, the
do.
thing is, sentences can lead in different ways. One
Yeah.
thing could be, he saw my mouth and just gave up the ghost at that point and decided there's nothing I can do and I'm a failure. and at that point, killed himself. But my parents were friends of a couple, a doctor and his wife, and they had a kid who was my age and was a friend, when I was like 10. And the mother committed suicide. And that is the real life point, but somehow in my head,
Yeah,
when
it became-
there was a sentence, this provoked me to think,
Right.
my orthodontist committed suicide when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
And then the story goes on from that. But to me, that is a grabbing sentence, because
It's
you're
grabbing
saying,
sense.
Yeah.
I'm going to just relate it to what we were talking
Oh,
about
here.
in terms of the Laurie Gwen Shapiro, a person in trouble. Now, on its
Okay.
face,
Yeah.
the person you have to infer the person in trouble is the 10-year-old.
yeah,
How does a 10-year-old
Right.
deal with it when this hands-on, relatively proximate, helpful and friendly figure
Yeah, well, this is
dies,
what is-
vanishes,
Yeah.
and is by his own hand? That is the person in trouble. And you want to keep reading from one sentence
Right.
because,
yeah,
right?
and the story goes on actually to talk about a group of people, a group of adults, or a group of families who are kind of, I think it's a very funny story actually, but with the funeral and what happens at the
Yeah.
funeral.
Yes.
And, it turns out that the orthodontist's wife was having an affair, and then all these very good friends who are a cluster of people who all hang out together because they were all communists in college, are trying to figure out, oh gee, how did he find out about the affair, and is that what caused him, and should we have said something because everybody knew about it except
I
the
get-
orthodontist
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
I'm
So-
gathering as you're talking, because I haven't read the story, but I'm gathering as you're talking that I can see the innovations that you were able to deal with,
But they were
still,
prompted in my head by the sentence before I had any of all that stuff.
And still, it's remarkable because I think it complicated the ordeal of the 10-year-old having to go through this kind of, I guess I'm going to embroider it as a Marx Brothers routine, seeing adults like that and doing things that he's surprised by. And he's surprised by it, and of course the readers are as well. I'm only just looking at time.
Oh,
we have
3 minutes and 6 seconds.
3 minutes
left.
for Laura. What are you going to say?
Oh my gosh. Well, I don't know, except let me just say this really quick. So after Wayne's talk this past week at Sawyer Free Library, although who knows when you're going to see this show, but at some point when Wayne did his talk, he talked about an ally. So I said, I'm sitting there thinking on the piece that I'm writing now, oh, wait a minute, like, who's the ally in my story? Oh, it's Giuseppa. But I don't know. I can feel it. I know it. So I have to go back now and make it more visible that she's the ally. And Wayne sends me this email, so you could do this and you can do that, and everything that Kurt Vonnegut said. So I'm thinking, well, what's an ally? So I Google it. And there's a lot of things that came out, but I Googled what types of allies are there to a protagonist. What, like if you're looking at a protagonist. So all kinds of types came out, like a loyal companion, a confidant, a reluctant helper, a foil. I think you were talking to me about a foil, a protector. And then there's key points to consider, and this grabbed me because this is what Giuseppa was without me saying it. A thematic relevance is important to who the ally is. So the type of allies a protagonist has can reflect the story's themes, such as the importance of friendship, trust, collaboration, overcoming differences. An ally has to be consistent, though, with the community of the faith or the neighbors or the family or the content of what the story is.
Representative of that.
Representative.
Yeah.
So if there's and in a recent conversation with my aunt, she was talking about the fort, how loyal people were, how much they helped each other, how they took care of each other's kids, they helped each other with foods. So if you're writing a story about that, the ally has to be someone that's reflective of that type of behavior, those kinds of characteristics.
Like that.
So
Yep.
I felt good about that because I'm not like I'm not an antagonistic. I don't want the confrontation. I didn't want to create I have this nice, homey, cozy, there's a problem, there's a protagonist, she solves it. But I didn't want her to have any other conflict. And it didn't fit. It didn't fit where she lived. It didn't fit the village. It didn't fit the people who lived there.
Right.
So, I just won't step on them. So I just wanted to say, I just had to say.
You can see this is spontaneous and unrehearsed.
Yeah.
We must leave. Next time we'll continue the discussion. Thank you all for attending, and it's been a delight. I wish we had more time for the many things that we've yet to cover. Go ahead and write. Thank you. Good night.
Tuolla Lontoossa Jennin mä kohtasin. Halo Vepi, oho. Hän on neidosten joukossa kaunihin. Halo Vepi, oho. Suukon kirsikkas silmät niin mustat kuin yö. Ja ne loisti kuin tuikkiva tähtien työ.